Howdy, gang. I'm Jeff McAleer. If you followed the gaming gang, then you already probably know that I underwent triple bypass surgery 2 weeks ago. I am on the road to recovery, and thank you very much for all the kind thoughts and prayers that were sent my way. But I do want to mention that I'm still a bit of a ways away from returning to the duct tape studios with any regularity, and that is mainly because of my voice. It is rather weak, it's hoarse, it's a bit raspy. Of course, that is from the breathing tube and other apparatus that was down my throat during the surgery. It's going to take some time for my voice to heal. So anyway, during the month of June, I originally had planned for this to be the Gaming Gang Spring Fling, where I was going to share a brand new review each and every day. Obviously enough, that fell through when on June 1st, I found myself in the hospital awaiting open heart surgery 6 days later. Of course, during these reviews, I mentioned the Spring Fling and how there's going to be a new review every day. And of course, that didn't come to fruition. But I still want to share these reviews with you. So today, without further ado, allow me to share my thoughts about Mutant Crawl Classics from Goodman Games. Come on in, pull up a chair, and take a load off, because today I'll be paging through and reviewing Mutant Crawl Classics from Goodman Games. Is this the nitro-fueled Gonzo post-apocalyptic role-playing game you've been looking for all your life? Or would you be better served taking this tome down into the Tomb of the Ancients and locking it away, never to see the light of day again? Well, you're going to find out right after this. Howdy, 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 gang. Welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. It is the Gaming Gang Spring Fling. That's right. Each and every day in June, you'll find a new review over at the Gaming Gang. Today, I am reviewing Mutant Crawl Classics from Goodman Games. It is written by Jim Wampler. I will provide art credit when we jump into the book. The 228-page hardcover carries an MSRP of $39.99. You can snag the PDF over at DriveThruRPG for $24.99. Do want to mention, if you do order the hardcover through the Goodman Games website, you will receive the PDF absolutely free right after placing your order. All right, let's swing on over to the other camera, because here I've got Mutant Crawl Classics. Before we jump in, I do want to point out I purchased this book. This was not a review copy sent to me by Goodman Games. So, of course, that obviously means that neither I nor anyone affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any sort of compensation from Goodman Games for me to share my thoughts about this book with you. It's important for you to know that, especially these days. So let's take a look at the back of the book. There isn't a lot of flavor text back here, but just give you a kind of a feel for the game. You're no hero. You're a wasteland wanderer, a mutant, a seeker, a robot killer, a stoic shaman guarding forgotten ancient sciences. You seek triumph in technology, winning it with mutations and magic, soaked in the radiation and quantum fields of the altered, the savage, the semi-sentient, and the artificially intelligent. There are artifacts of the ancients to be won in the taboo lands, and you shall have them. MCC RPG is a complete role-playing game of 1970s post-apocalyptic science fantasy. Remember these words, because we are going to discuss these words a bit later on in the review. All right, let's dive on in. I do want to point out that I am going to stay picture-in-picture up here. So you'll notice I'm going to be cutting off a little bit of the pages up here as well. So there's a lot of cool artwork throughout, and a lot of it's got that late 70s, early 80s Gonzo role-playing vibe to it. Really, really like a ton of the artwork in here. So let's find out who provided this cool artwork. So we have Chris Arneson, Fred Daly, Tom Galambos, Friedrich Haas, Cliff Karowski, Barry James, Doug Kovacs, William McAuslin, Brad McDevitt, Stefan Pogue, Chad Sergesketer, Jim Wampler, and Michael Wilson-Getter. And I apologize. I'm sure I've mispronounced a variety of names there. All right, so we're going to dive on in. First off, we're going to get a foreword by James M. Ward, who happens to be the creator of the first science fiction role-playing game ever created. It's Metamorphosis Alpha. And we get a preface from Jim Wampler as well, who is the author of this book. Funny thing is, Goodman Games actually publishes Metamorphosis Alpha now. I think it's in the 5th edition. I got to be honest, I have never actually completely read any edition of Metamorphosis Alpha. I think I glanced at the 2nd edition years and years and years ago. But just throwing that out there. Jim Wampler, if you are familiar with Dungeon Crawl Classics, which I recently did a review of, Jim Wampler was the host, one of the original hosts of Spellburn, the podcast devoted to DCC, as well as one of the hosts of Save or Die, which I got to be honest, I've never listened to Save or Die. I don't know if it's still around, but I do know it was around for a long time if it's not. So we had a bit of an introduction. So we had a little bit of a look at what is the setting of the game. It's only a couple of pages, so it's really not a ton to dive into. Essentially, it's kind of Earth. It's Terra. If you want it to be Earth, you can make it that. If you want it to be the Empire of the East, you can do that. A lot of leeway in how you can present the campaign setting itself. One of the first things I noticed, got to mention, when I started reading Mutant Crawl Classics, having recently reviewed Dungeon Crawl Classics, love it, gave it a 10 out of 10. It is that good in my opinion. And also reviewing the first time fan kit for DCC, also giving that a 10 out of 10. I was surprised by the page count. There is a good 100 plus pages fewer in MCC compared to DCC. And I got to be honest, I think it really works against Mutant Crawl Classics, especially when we get into actually running the game. All right, so talk about the core mechanic. It's D20. So you're looking at a D20, higher is better, lower is bad. And of course, you'll have the DCs, the checks that you'll utilize. And of course, just like open game license, right? You're looking at beating an armor class with your roll. A little bit of discussion. How is this different than other role-playing games, as well as how is this a little different than Mutant Crawl Classics? So we got character creation. This is very, very similar to DCC. We utilize the Zaki dice. We've got the dice chains as well. The abilities are strength, agility, stamina, personality, intelligence, and luck. Just like in DCC, the player characters can burn luck. They can spend luck to improve their die rolls. And one aspect in this is the pure strain humans can actually regenerate luck, something I'm not super keen on. So these are like really, really random characters, because Mutant Crawl Classics also believes in the 0 level funnel, where the players are all going to have a variety of different characters. They're going to run through kind of a meat grinder, and whoever survives, well, those are the player characters. I think that's a blast. I know some folks despise a funnel adventure. If that's the case, no big deal. Just start your characters off at first level. So we go through, we've got various different tables. That's one thing that Goodman Games role-playing games are known for, a variety of different tables. I know that gives people the impression that the game is complex, especially Dungeon Crawl Classics, because of the sheer number of tables. But the thing is, you may never use some of these tables. You may use one once. So we had discussion about advancing in level. Very, very easy. Your encounters are 1 to 4 experience points. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to kill stuff to get experience points. And, of course, you'll just add up your experience points from the encounters to level up. So as opposed to every single, oh, well, that monster is like, okay, so I got 35 experience points from that, but I gotta share that. So hold on, let me divide that. None of that. It's very easy as far as the advancement of your characters and levels. So we got the character classes, which in Dungeon Crawl Classics, I found every single character class to be interesting and that I would want to run a character out of any and all of those classes. That was one of the things I really, really like about DCC is each class is flavorful and comes across as being a lot of fun to play. Here we run into what I think is the first stumbling block with Mutant Crawl Classics, and that is the classes, especially the pure strain human classes. So we got the Sentinels. Sentinels effectively the warrior, which in Dungeon Crawl Classics, the cool thing, one of the cool things about the warriors is they get a mighty deed. So do dwarves, which allows them to do like just crazy off the wall stuff. Whatever you can imagine trying to do, you explain how you're going to try to do it, and you got a mighty D die, and you're rolling, and you can pull that stuff off. Really, really flavorful action. It's gone. There is no mighty deeds in Mutant Crawl Classics. Also, each of the character classes in Dungeon Crawl Classics. I need a sip here. Each of the classes in Dungeon Crawl Classics has 3-4 pages devoted to it. Here, we essentially get not even a full page. We get half a page, and then we get a breakdown of their levels and their bonuses at various different levels. So just like Dungeon Crawl Classics, there is a cutoff at 10th level, but the reality is it's about twice as powerful. So as opposed to, say, like a 5th edition or a Pathfinder character. So a 2nd level character in MCC or DCC, you're really looking at about 4th or even 5th level in most role-playing games that utilize levels and go like to 20. So we got the shaman. So the shaman is effectively your wizard. And they use wetware programs instead of spells. So, and they can invoke a patron artificial intelligence. So whereas in Dungeon Crawl Classics, the wizards can have patrons. In fact, anybody can have a patron. But a lot of times the wizards do tend to have patrons. That is the case here as well. But there just seems to be a lot stripped out of these character classes, especially like I mentioned, for the humans. I don't know. We got the healer, which the healer is essentially the cleric, but without the deity that they worship, without the disapproval possibility of the deity, which adds a lot more flavor and role-playing to the adventures. Something else that the humans all do is they all regenerate luck, which kind of cheapens the luck factor, the spending luck in the game, because in Dungeon Crawl Classics, only the rogue and the halfling regenerate luck. In fact, the halfling's kind of like a luck battery. is what it's sort of known as. But the other classes, if they spend luck, that luck is gone. Now, it is possible through good role playing and through adventures, you might gain some luck back. But for the most part, with every other character class, if you spend luck, well, then that luck's gone. That is not the case with the humans. And I got to point out, the human character classes feel bland to me. They really do. But we start to make up for that with the mutants. So we got the mutants, we've got sentient animals, as well as sentient plant creatures. So we get into the mutants, we've got the manimal, we got the plantians. So, but once again, we only get, just a little bit. So one thing that the humans are able to do much better than the mutants is they can utilize technology, and AIs recognize them because they look human. The mutants don't normally. So these ancient devices don't recognize them as living beings. All right, so we get a bunch of info about the various different mutations, and this is one of the selling points for Mutant Crawl Classics. Now, inside the book itself, it is presented as both a supplement for Dungeon Crawl Classics as well as a full-fledged role-playing game that stands on its own. Can you be both things? Certainly. Is this both things? We'll discuss in a bit. So we got all these various different mutations, and just like spell use in Dungeon Crawl Classics, you're going to roll your 20-sided die, see if you're successful. Of course, you can burn luck to increase that. You can, it's not called spell burn. I think, if I remember correctly, I think it's rad burn is what they call it. But it's kind of the same thing. You can spend your ability points and add that to your die roll as well. And I got to point out, there are some really cool mutations. There are really cool mutation effects also. And one of the really cool aspects of both Dungeon Crawl Classics and Mutant Crawl Classics is that the spells and programs and mutations don't always do the same exact thing. And I love that. I love that aspect of the rules system. So we got loads and loads of this. Then another aspect, you'll see we've got defects. So some of these are pretty wild as well. Mega mutations. So these are like big, really big deals. Metallic skin, phase shift. So a huge chunk of page count is devoted to three things really in this book. First one is the mutations, the AI patrons, as well as the programs. Combats and skills, not a whole heck of a lot of page space devoted to this. Now, I will point out that this really isn't that crunchy a system. As I said, a lot of people think because they see these tables, it's like, oh my gosh, this must be a really, really difficult system to wrap your head around. It's not. It's far easier than any of, I shouldn't say any, but a vast majority of the very popular modern role-playing game systems out there. Well, we've got the critical tables, which is something I really like about the system as well. But as you can see, there's a lot of tables here. There's not necessarily a lot of rules here. And, of course, we've got rules about death and dying. There you go, damage and death. Healing, burning your luck, saving throws. Of course, once again, there are 3 types of saving throws, just like in Dungeon Crawl Classics. We've got the Fortitude, Reflex, and Will saving throws. But these are all the rules. That's it. I mean, that really is all the rules as far as running the game. One thing that's not in this book is a game master section. There's no judges section to this. So we have alignments. So alignments change in Mutant Crawl Classics. Rather than having lawful, neutral, and chaotic, now we sort of have factions. So the alignments become factions that you are aligned with. And these are actually pretty cool. These are very interesting. One of the aspects of the factions is, especially like humans, you can have the humans are really looking towards, reclaiming technology and finding, various different items from the past. So pretty cool. And there are enough factions here that are in conflict with each other to add a lot of good flavor to your campaigns as well. So here we get into the artificial intelligences, which are essentially patrons, which are in Dungeon Crawl Classics. So we do get some information about cyborgs and robots, security bots, war bots, artifacts of the ancient ones. I thought this is a pretty cool image here. But that was pretty nice. So it just kind of gives you some information about different things that could be found. Then we get the various different weapons and gear, get some descriptions of these as well. I like the fact that we get quite a few images for these also. I think that's pretty cool. I'm just trying to jump ahead a bit. We get a bestiary with various different creatures. There aren't a ton. I mean, it's not necessarily a monster manual, but also Mutant Crawl Classics does stick with the vibe of, monsters should be weird and different and unique, as opposed to, oh, look, it's goblins again. So here's the patron AIs. This is what I meant when we were looking at artificial intelligences. This is the patron AIs. These are like the patrons that the players can have in Dungeon Crawl Classics. A lot of times your wizards will have them, and there's a lot of them. There are loads of patrons in here. So I thought that is cool. I like that, because one of the aspects of the core book for Dungeon Crawl Classics I thought was a little lacking was in deities as well as the patrons. There were only a handful of patrons. Here we've got loads. But as I mentioned before, this is really one of the other sections of the book that really have a higher page count devoted to them, and that is the patron AIs. Now, you don't necessarily have to be a shaman to have a patron, but the shaman usually will have a patron. All right. So then we're going to get into, see, we still have more patrons here as we move it along. We get into optional rules. Nothing too heavy. Some of it is really kind of devoted towards if you want to have Mutant Crawl Classics characters in MCC or MCC characters in DCC. The MCC characters do tend to be a little more powerful than the level equivalent in Dungeon Crawl Classics. Then we get an adventure. It's a first or zero level. So you can use it as a funnel, or you can use it as a first level adventure. I thought it was okay. I thought it's an all right adventure. It didn't knock my socks off, but I thought it was a pretty good adventure. We did have a section there. It was like kind of like our Appendix M as opposed to Appendix N. And it talks about some of the 70s TV shows and novels and movies. Then we're going to finish up with an index as well as our funnel character sheets and a discussion of, at the time of this printing, what was available for Mutant Crawl Classics. I believe they are up to Adventure 11 now. And that is everything between the covers of Mutant Crawl Classics. Let's swing on over to the other camera. I'm going to share some final thoughts and give this a review score. I'm torn on Mutant Crawl Classics. And the reason why I'm torn is because it's presented as two different things. It's presented as a supplement for Dungeon Crawl Classics. If you want to use Dungeon Crawl Classics core mechanics in a post-apocalyptic kind of Gonzo setting. But it's also advertised right on the back of the book that it is a standalone, full-fledged role-playing game. I disagree. I really do. If we take all the pages devoted to the actual rules and character creation, we're looking at maybe 20 pages. All the rest is supplemental material. It's all about the new monsters, the patron AIs, as well as the various different mutations. And I think those are great. I think all that stuff is really well done. Really, really dig it. But problem is, it's not a full role-playing game. There is no section of this book talking about how do you run Mutant Crawl Classics. Now, is that a big deal for somebody who's got years and years of experience running role-playing games or playing role-playing games? Not really. But a lot of people don't have tons of experience. And they're thinking, hey, Mutant Crawl Classics looks pretty cool. I think I'll pick that up because I would like kind of a Gonzo post-apocalyptic sort of game. I've heard all these cool things about Gamma World back in the day. I want to try to run a game sort of like that. Problem is, there isn't really that core to Mutant Crawl Classics that there is in Dungeon Crawl Classics. And I think that's where this really stumbles. Add into that the fact that the 4 human character classes, in my opinion, are fairly bland. They don't stand out. They don't feel like they're exciting. As I mentioned during the page through, when I reviewed Dungeon Crawl Classics, one of the great things about it, in my opinion, is every class is interesting, and I could personally see myself playing any one of those classes and having a blast. Not so here. Also don't like the luck factor where all the humans get to regenerate luck. I don't know. There's just something about that. I'm not too keen on every single human character, pure strain human, gets to do that. So I don't know. I don't feel there's enough that separates the classes. Plus, I think there's some cool stuff from each of the DCC classes that are kind of stripped away to their equivalents here in MCC. So as a supplement to Dungeon Crawl Classics, I think this is really, really cool. I really do like it. On the other hand, as a standalone role-playing game, I'm not too keen. So the reality is, as a supplement, I would probably give it about an 8.5 out of 10. Definitely recommend it if you already have your core with Dungeon Crawl Classics and you're going to add on Mutant Crawl Classics. There's a lot of stuff that is very cool that you can port over. Or if you want, to bring your DC characters into, a post-apocalyptic world, there's tons of goodies in here for you to be able to do that. So I would give it an 8.5 out of 10. As a role-playing game, though, as a standalone RPG, I would only give this a 6 out of 10 because I think it's really skipping on the important like GM judges information that I think all good role-playing game books need. So all in all, if I kind of combine the two together, I give Mutant Crawl Classics a 7 out of 10. Once again, if you're going to use it as supplemental material for Dungeon Crawl Classics, highly recommend it. Really, really do like it. If you're looking to run this as a standalone role-playing game, I mean, it's not horrible. I think you can. I think you could salvage the classes as well if you made some tweaks. But the thing is, you shouldn't have to make those tweaks, right? Shouldn't have to home rule a bunch of stuff when you're first picking up a game. All right. Anyway, that is it for this time out. If you like this video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, ding that bell, because it'll not only let you know when I upload videos such as this review, it'll also let you know when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Monday through Thursday nights right here on YouTube. As I bring you not only the latest in tabletop gaming news, but a first look at a tabletop game, be it a board game, role-playing game, miniatures, rules, what have you. All right, once again, my name is Jeff McAleer, and thank you very much for watching. And until next time, good gaming. Oh, you're still here. Well, while you're kicking it, how about subscribing to the Gaming Gang channel, or seeing the latest episode of the Gaming Gang Dispatch, or finding out what YouTube recommends you check out here at my channel. And of course, don't forget, get your geek on at thegaminggang.com.